Hello and welcome to the final part of this D365 Finance and Operations EAM demo. This is where we have a look at the work order in a bit more detail in terms of how we execute that on both the laptop and on the mobile device. This is part of a series of demos which looks at the overall process, how we set up functional locations, how we set up the maintenance plan, and this is now the execution of that. In terms of what we're going to show, we've been looking at the setting up of the work and the automatic generation of it, but when we actually come to carrying out the work, we have different options that are available to us. What we've seen before is that we have the planned work, which we can do either a maintenance plan or a maintenance round, and we've shown the scheduling of that. But we can also have breakdowns which come through from maintenance requests, which could be generated from anyone, but they have to have a process by which they're created as to work orders, carry out the work, which is really the corrective work which is done from a breakdown. Once you have a list of work, you then have to decide how you're actually going to schedule the work and give it to individuals. We've got about four main methods. We have a planner, so you can look at your work schedule and actually get the planner to decide who that work needs to go to. You can have it as a consensus, in other words, there's a work list that you're working to. So if you have a number of people who are working in a functional location or an area, they can see the work that's coming forward and they can, based on that group, go through the maintenance based on the demands of the day. Or you can actually create worker pools. In other words, you create a work of pools of different individuals and you allocate work to a pool. The fourth type is really the process of a maintenance stop. So if you do have situations where the plant is down for a particular period, either a planned downtime or something has happened to it that it's not working for a particular period because it's missing a part, you do have a maintenance intervention opportunity. And that then allows you to then look at the overall view of the plans that you've got and basically pull work forward to take advantage of the time when that machine is done. The core part of carrying out the work is there's the break fix team, which is just going out and doing that either on a tablet or from hard copies. But we also have an inspection team. So this is quite often happens on the rounds, and we'll create work orders that other people need to look at from the inspection point of view. Either those are work orders or work requests. So that's the overall process. But if we have a look at the overall diagram, which we've been using before, we're really at the tail end of this end-to-end process, actually all the executing and closing of the work. We've already seen how we've set up the assets and how they're pulled together and what the asset structure looks like. We've also shown how we generate jobs and how that generates a preventative maintenance schedule and the generation of the work orders, which will show the cycle to get those ready for the engineer to go out and close the work. So we'll now go into the system itself. Okay, so let's have a look at the system and look at the functionality that we have in terms of being able to execute the work order. Just going back to the menu items here on asset management, we've looked at the setup of the assets and the locations, and we looked up how to set up the maintenance plans and the routes themselves, and also looked at how we schedule those. And we're now at the point of we've created work orders and they're ready to be executed. Now, just to go into the system, we have two workspaces as standard. The first of all is the work order space, looking at what work orders have been created, which have been scheduled, which are ready to be unscheduled to individuals. And I'll talk through the overall process about how we take from a work order to getting it onto the end user to be able to carry out the work. But the other aspect to works orders that I haven't touched on is work requests. Now, work requests will come through from either inspections, in other words, people walking a line and finding things that are wrong, and they identify those, and they can be identified by anyone really within inside the system. They can also be generated with sensors, and once they've actually been created, they end up in an overall list of all the maintenance requests. And this is an example of some of the maintenance requests that have been created. They're relatively simple. As you can see, some of these already have work orders, but let's go and just show you what one of those would look like. So if we just come down to this one, which is a corrective, it gives you an idea about the type of maintenance, how serious it is, who's started it or generated this one, and its current status. Again, like everything else, everything has a particular status. And then we identify the asset or the asset area or the functional location, and then it is generally verified by someone. It goes through a stage of saying, is this correct or not? And then it is converted into a works order, and that's the general process from that. You can also go through and actually have a look at the asset fault and add any faults that are linked to the work request, and that gives you an overall picture of what is going wrong and how you're actually fixing those. And it could be that these work requests actually lead to the creation of a more preventative maintenance schedule. But let's get back to the works orders, and let's go and show you the work order list. As I've seen, I've shown it in terms of the workspace. I'll show it to you as a normal area. So these are all the work orders, and when we have a look at a work order list, as we can see from here, this is the action that you're going to be asking somebody to go out and do. So this is what we're going to give it to an individual, and you'll see that it has a number of different stages. It starts from new, then it gets released, and then it gets to scheduled, and then progress, and then complete. And that sort of process can dictate how you actually manage your engineers. So from the planning perspective, you can schedule them, and then the planner can also assign work to an individual. They get it up to a stage of, say, like released. We'll have a look at this particular work order in detail. So it basically gives you an overall number that is an instruction to carry out a piece of work. It has an expected time when it needs to be finished, expected schedule date, and an actual time. So you can manage when that piece of maintenance work was carried out. It then describes the maintenance job that you are going to do. So it can contain a lot of items or assets that you have to look at, or just one, as in this particular case. And then it also gives you the opportunity here to go and create any either purchase requisitions or purchase orders for that particular piece of work. But it can also, in certain process manufacturing examples, ask for an actual production order to be created in order to potentially test something that you've created after you've maintained it. And then the lines themselves, this gives you some more information about the asset itself and gives you some descriptions which you can add, or the information has come back from the maintenance workers, comes back, so you start to get a bigger picture. And then we've got how we're actually going to schedule it. And for certain items, we can actually give an address and give information about where that asset is, if you have to go and send one specifically to a location where the engineer doesn't necessarily know too much about. Okay, so that's a works order, and you'll see from the above there's a number of different activities around them. Again, you can add faults as you start to come through with that. You can also go through and assign it to an actual particular pool. So you might not give it to an individual, but you might give it to a particular group of people, or you might be a works order which is you work in a particular area of the factory and you look after all the work orders in that area. So that could be when you are linked to a functional location, and we can show that. On the works orders, there's job notes, there's tools, there are maintenance checklists that we need to go forward. We can look at condition assessments, we can update the assets. This is in progress, so we could actually go through and update the time. So what you have in here, you have a forecast, is what you think that job is going to involve. So we think it's going to take 0.5 of an hour to do, and it can have its overall expenses. But we can also create a journal, and from the journal we can copy from the forecast to just bring that along. So we could just let's copy the hours, and that will bring it from the forecast, or we could actually add that ourselves. So you can either take the standard hours and load it to the system, or you can add it manually. So I could add more hours to that. If I'd found there's any items that I needed from the warehouse that was available, I would have picked them up from here and added from there. And also if I'd gone through and looked at any expenses, so for example it might have been a contracted piece of work and I've incurred some expenses from that, I'll pull that together. And once I've finished that, I'll then go and post it, and that's the general process by which we close off the order inside the application. What I'll also do is I'll show you how we actually do that from inside the mobile application. Same sort of area, we've actually got attachments of the documents, so if we have any photographs or any particular check sheets that maybe we filled in manually and we need to take a photograph of it, then we can add that here. And the other sort of aspect from here is that if we've got any areas in terms of managing the purchase orders or looking at how the overall hours or having a work order report, we've got all the information in one place. So just to summarize, the works order is a package of work which can contain multiple work orders. We can assign it to individual people to carry out that work, or it can be done by a group, and it's got all the controls to the rest of the system to pull that work together to close it off and get any parts or materials that are needed. Okay, just a couple of other things to sort of bring to your attention on this overview. So for example, I just wanted to look at all the work order for my functional locations. This will actually give me a much closer list because I'm assigned to a particular area of the factory, so I can get a very close view of that order, and I can see who this particular case it's scheduled to. So if I wanted to, and it was in a release form, I can go through and I can just dispatch it to an individual worker itself, or you can finish it off and then you can just add your time and your expenses directly into forecast. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how we do that. The other thing to look at from here is that we do have maintenance downtime. So if an asset has gone down, then I can carry out the work and I can pull work to that and then carry out that work in that situation. Other areas I've got loans, and I can loan an asset to an individual part of the business should I need it. And that's really the overall view. I'll go and show you now how some of this would look if we use the standard mobile application. Okay, so here we have a view of how the application would look on, in this particular case, an iPad, but similar to an iPhone or any other device that you have. On the outside here, we have what it looks like inside the system, and then this is what it looks like as the user would see this. This is very simple to set up. Basically, we just enable it inside this wheel and here to mobilize the application, and then you just link it to your environment, and then you need to be set up as an individual worker inside the systems to be able to see this, but relatively simple steps to do. What we have on here, we have the same sort of process. We can see all the active functional locations. So this is what the system will do. It'll load it up and we can go down and see where all our individual locations are, and then we can drill down and do some more detailed investigation should we need it. Not that there's very much really inside this one, but we can see that I'm obviously linked into this functional location. Now, the other thing that we probably want to show is we've got all the assets, but I'm just going to really just focus in on the works orders. So we can see the works orders here. We've got a very similar to what we can see down in front of us. But if I was going to sort of just flick down through that one to number 11, this seems to go in the opposite direction to what it's on the screen. This is giving you a line 2 extruder where the barrel guard is becoming loose. So we can see that it's a safety issue. We can see also, if we actually go down, that it's actually got one maintenance job, this maintenance line, but it could have 3 or 4 different assets that you've been asked to have a look at. We've got this, that it's part of a work order pool, and we've got some expected start and end dates. Again, it looks like a bit behind on this one. You can add additional items. So if you've come across an area where you've got an asset that you think also needs to be looked at as a part of this maintenance, you can add that. We can actually go through here and actually have a look at this job itself, and then this is actually going to pull up the overall process, so you can actually go through and add an attachment, and that's just really as quickly as just using the camera of the device to pull that information in. I'd show it to you now, but the room I'm in is not particularly conducive to showing what a good room should look like. And then we also have the processes to get over and actually see the information that we can collect. So we can look at we can update the counter, we can add our own notes, and then we can also go and add the journal time to add hours and etc. that we actually need to. So I might actually go through and say that this is going to, so I'll give identifying who I am, and then I'm just going to go through and just say that it's in this particular case it's non-billable work, and I've actually just put in 3 hours work. So that's the overall sort of process that you would use actually when we're inside the system. And then when we've done that, we can just close that one, and that will go back into the system, and then we can see that as when it next syncs. You see it's got 8 at the bottom, it hasn't quite synced yet, back up to the system, and then that will just go and update the works order. So that's a very sort of quick overview of the mobile side. It's, as I said, it's all ready to go as soon as you get the application. You can look at it based on job lists. There's lots of different areas to look at it from an individual location, such as looking at your requests or your work orders from an individual area, and then closing those jobs off. For more information about asset management and asset management thinking, as well as other videos in this series, please use the link below. Thank you.